Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google. And if you're on Apple, please drop us a comment. My name is Shiro Hattori, and I will be your host today. And today I'm really excited to talk about the sweet harmony of when strategic branding meets strategic planning. And I have an amazing guest to talk about this today. We have Ann Peters joining us. She is the Associate Vice President of University Marketing and Special Projects at the University of Texas at San Antonio, which we'll be referring to sometimes as UTSA as well. And welcome to the show, Ann.
Thank you, Shiro. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you as well. And it's great to meet you in person 2 weeks ago at AMA as well, and actually sit in on this presentation you gave.
I was so glad you were able to attend, and it was such a pleasure to meet you in person after having listened to your podcast, and I'm now a big fan. So
thank you.
Thanks again for the invite.
Appreciate it. And as you may listen to some episodes, I do ask all my guests, what do you love about higher ed?
So that's an easy question, Shiro, because I've been in higher ed communications and marketing for my whole career, essentially. And I wouldn't have stayed as long as I did if it wasn't, I think, the best field to work in. So as a marketing professional, I believe deeply that you have to be marketing something that you are really passionate about in order to do your job well, and in order to find pleasure in your work. And I just believe so passionately and deeply in the power of higher education to see the way that it transforms lives. And I really feel like higher ed is doing heroes work out there, right? We're transforming lives and enabling people to get to a better place in their lives. And so it's a noble enterprise. So I feel really good about marketing higher ed as a professional, but then also just on a personal level, working on college campuses is really fun. It's just fun. You know, they're great environments. You step outside your office and you see the students and you see the activity on campus. It's a great reminder of why we do what we do every day. So my fun little anecdote is my office is located just down the hall from the Department of Physics at UTSA. And so I have the pleasure of seeing physics students in my hallway doing experiments, rolling balls and making noise. And it's really fun. So just about every week I can go out and see students in action. And that's the joy of working in higher ed for sure.
That's fantastic. Students in action. I like it. Going a little bit more into our topics here today, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at UTSA?
Sure. So I've been at UTSA for going on 14 years now, which is a long time, but I've been in different roles over time. And before I came to UTSA, I've worked for a variety of institutions. I've worked for small private colleges. I've worked for large public universities. I've worked for a university that is a public university masquerading as a private university, as I like to say. And now I'm at UTSA, which is a large Hispanic serving, urban serving university in the heart of San Antonio. We are San Antonio's university. And I started in different communications roles there based in units at UTSA, and then moved into the president's office, did presidential communications for a period of time, then had the opportunity to take on the university marketing team and special projects teams. So I have the joy of overseeing our institutional marketing and branding development, as well as website development for the institution as a whole, as well as special projects, which is kind of a catch-all for special events, high-level university events that need a lot of TLC and have high visibility. So it's a real wonderful kind of portfolio that I have. It's a little unique, I think, in terms of the mix, and it's been just such a pleasure to get to develop those aspects of UTSA over the last several years.
That's fantastic. I actually didn't know about the special projects, and I thought that entailed the strategic planning that you do. But what are some examples of the events that you've worked on?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a real fun aspect of my job. We do things, everything from groundbreakings of new buildings and grand openings of new buildings to major events that commemorate university milestones, university excellence awards. We do events that are, anniversary celebrations for the university. We do all sorts of things. And if they're kind of considered presidential level or high level events, that's where my team gets involved. We also run all of our VIP football hospitality for our games, which is a whole different realm in terms of that's where we get into the community engagement and the government elected official engagement, as well as donor engagement side of things. So it's a real interesting, real interesting mix.
That probably keeps you busy and makes the job pretty fun because you're doing a lot of different things.
It is. It's super fun. It's super fun. I never envisioned myself, down on a football field at a university, kind of running VIPs around and engaging with folks that way. But here I am. Our careers take us interesting places.
That's great. Wow, that's new. That's new news to me. Do you work with like alumni engagement or alumni teams with that university advancement?
Yes, we partner very closely with our advancement and alumni engagement team. So we are a big decentralized university. We have right around 34,000, 35,000 students. So like a lot of universities our size, we've got, teams all across campus doing different flavors of marketing communications. And so I kind of oversee the central team that's setting the standards, brand standards, and providing the resources and kind of the strategy around our institutional marketing as a whole. And then we partner very closely with strategic enrollment, of course, on our enrollment marketing side of the house, but we have a whole separate team that does that. And then I partner very closely with the folks in the president's office that do strategic planning and presidential events and such. And then our advancement and alumni team on a variety of events and programs that kind of have a crossover between donors and other types of VIPs.
So one of the conversations I have often on the podcast is around how the different silos of marketing and marketing affiliated teams need to be better connected and communicate more often. And it sounds like you are actually the physical embodiment of someone who's responsible for doing that. I didn't tie these dots last time, but that's what I'm hearing. That's great.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of putting it, Shiro. And that's kind of been my legacy in a way at UTSA is I'm a little bit of a silo buster and a huge collaborator and team builder. That's been my MO from the beginning. So it's a good fight to try and constantly tear down that territorialism and remind ourselves that we're all one university and we're all trying to ultimately reach the same goals. So let's all work together and share resources and share people. And so we have all sorts of cross collaborative teams at UTSA that get together regularly. And so I kind of see my central role as the conductor perhaps of sorts, give everybody the guideposts and the resources and empower them to go do their jobs well. And it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well.
Gotcha. I thought of a new hook for this episode, which is why every large state university needs an Ann Peters.
Oh, you were very kind, but thank you.
Right. Let's jump into the topic here today. I know that you were part of a panel that presented at AMA Symposium in Chicago just 2 weeks ago, which probably be around 6 weeks when this gets posted. And your presentation topic was on Sweet Harmony, when strategic branding meets strategic planning. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to present this topic, why you thought there was a need for it, and then go into some of the key takeaways as well?
Absolutely. So I want to give a shout out first and foremost to my co-presenters at that session. It was a very well attended session. We were so delighted with the strong turnout. We really weren't sure if the topic was going to be of interest. It's a little different, and we, as we were putting it together, we kept saying to ourselves, gosh, we've never really seen anyone present exactly on this topic before, or seen this show up at any conferences. This feels like it might be a little unique to be examining the intersection between strategic planning and strategic branding in this way. In my experience in past institutions I've worked for, the folks doing strategic planning and the folks doing marketing communications weren't always connecting with each other. That wasn't, they weren't meeting regularly. They weren't finding intersections in their work. And that's been very different at UTSA. At UTSA, we have managed to find that very close collaboration. So Lisa Jasinski was one of my co-presenters. She is my colleague here at UTSA that oversees UTSA's strategic planning process. And then Grant DeRue was our other co-presenter, and he is with ADB Research, which is the marketing research firm that we use at UTSA to do our regular perception studies and brand impact studies, so that we have a regular research cycle that we use so we can measure trend lines over time around how our audiences feel about us and what their opinions are of us. So Grant, Lisa, and I put this presentation together and just had a great time doing it, because we every time we met, it was like, an hour's worth of amazing discussion. And then we'd kind of go, oh yeah, and then we need a PowerPoint slide for that too. So it was a lot of fun. So the kind of the impetus for putting this together was that UTSA recently went through a strategic planning refresh process. So when our president arrived about 6 years ago, one of the first things he did, as many new presidents do, is put together a strategic plan for the institution. And the plan was intended to last about 10 years. We are about halfway, little over halfway now through that plan. And because our president is such an amazing visionary and leader and has really taken us on this fantastic trajectory, we managed to check off a lot of those items that were on our strategic plan in the first 5 years. So in his wisdom, he said, it is time for a fresh look at our strategic plan, not necessarily to change our direction or make any major changes, but just to kind of look at what have we accomplished, what's left, and are there things we may want to add to the plate now that we've accomplished so much. So Lisa came on board at UTSA right around the time that this refresh process was starting. So she led that process, and she and I were very close collaborators throughout the whole thing. As soon as she was hired, I called her up probably on day 2 and said, you and I need to be besties. I want to be besties with you, and here's why. I've always felt that over my whole career that there needed to be a closer connection between strategic planning and marketing and branding, because in many ways, marketing is the public expression of your institution's strategy, right? That's a line that my colleague Grant used a lot and used in our presentation, that marketing is the public expression of strategy. And I thought that was so brilliant, because that really says it all. We can't do our jobs as marketers well unless we are furthering the institution's strategic priorities. But the problem is, a lot of times the institution's strategic priorities and your audience's priorities aren't the same. They can be very different. So how do you resolve that? How do you bring those viewpoints to the table, the strategic planning table? How do you make the case that, we probably should pay attention to marketplace demands when we are putting together our strategic plan? We should probably know where our audiences want to see us go, not just where we want to go as an institution, as the folks on the inside. And sometimes that can be a tough case to make, because in academia, there's a little bit of an attitude of, we know what's best. We know what's best for our audiences. We just need to teach them what's best or tell them what's best. But as marketers, we know that doesn't always fly, right? We have to pay attention to our audience's needs and language and perceptions. So I said, this strategic planning refresh process is an excellent opportunity to bring some market data to the table, to bring that lens to the process, and not to run it by any means, or not to lead necessarily the direction of our strategic plan, but to inform it so that our audiences are part of the plan and not just part of the result, so to speak.
That's fantastic. That's a great story into the why, and it makes a lot more sense as well for me now. And how did you actually go about doing this research and getting buy-in for it as well to start? Because I'm assuming you needed a budget and a plan for this as well, and how it was going to reflect at that high level of strategic planning for the institution.
When I came into my role, or when I took on the university marketing team, one of the first things I wanted to do is implement a regular research cycle. We hadn't really done that at UTSA before. And I knew inherently that in order to measure ourselves, measure our success, we were going to need first a baseline of where we stood currently among our key audiences, and then be able to measure that over time to see if we're moving the dial. Are there perceptions of UTSA improving? Is awareness level improving? Are there understanding of us as an institution, is that aligning with our brand and our strategic priorities? Or do they think of us in contexts completely separate, right, from how we think of ourselves as an institution? What danger zones do we need to be aware of? Where are our perceptions not strong or not positive? All these things that research can tell you, right? So basically, it was a budget prioritization process for me. I came in, I looked at the budget I had to work with, and I took a big old earmark and said, this will be for research. And I will make this for research every year. That's that important to me. And so at UTSA, we do 2 major studies a year, and then sometimes we sprinkle in a couple of smaller ones depending on what's going on, what we need to know. But the 2 biggies we do every year, we do a perception study of our San Antonio market. And these are just the general community, right? So it's not prospective students, it's not parents of prospective students necessarily, it's just general community members. And then we do a second study that's similar, but in key Texas markets. So for us, that's Austin, Houston, Dallas, and the Rio Grande Valley. And we've been doing that now. I think we're going to be on our 3rd year this fall. And so it's been really great because even between year 1 and year 2, we got to see some dial moving. Wow. And then, as far as showing your own successes and accountability as a professional, that's of course marvelous too, because you can bring that to leadership and say, right, look, perceptions have changed over time and we have the data to prove it.
That's fantastic. And do you mind sharing some examples of what you found and how you changed or shifted some of your messaging based on learnings as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably not surprisingly, I mean, the survey is that we use is fairly extensive and we look at a lot of different areas, but, in terms of the strategic plan intersection, we most definitely wanted to know, what were some of the most important characteristics of the university that our audiences had. What do they think a university should be doing? What do they think UTSA in particular should be doing? And not surprisingly, their highest priorities tend to be things that are very near and dear to their hearts, right, and to their personal experiences. So, career preparation always tops the list. They want to be sure, they think it's important that students graduate prepared to walk into good careers and good jobs. Totally makes sense. Excellent teaching, high quality teaching is another one that always tops the list. Affordability is often the third one that rounds out that list. And so, those things are things that then we take and say, okay, these are things that we need to amplify around how UTSA is, kind of our prowess in those areas, right? How we're making an impact on students' lives, how we're preparing them for careers, how we're ensuring that a UTSA education is affordable, and talking about our faculty and their teaching prowess. So, it's that's just one example of a learning that we received from those surveys. But what was interesting to me is those three things I just mentioned: career preparation, excellent teaching, and affordability.
Mm-hmm.
None of those were cornerstones of our strategic plan at UTSA.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so, that was, and they were in there. They were aspects, but they weren't necessarily called out as, these are our highest priorities, right? So the things that, our internal stakeholders and leadership identified as kind of what makes UTSA distinct and important were things like the fact that we were a Carnegie R1, had just achieved Carnegie R1 status from the Carnegie classification of higher education institutions. The fact that we enable social mobility being a big, kind of buzzword in higher ed right now. The fact that over the last decade, we have successfully increased the number of degrees that we grant from UTSA while reducing the time it takes students to get that degree. Right? These are all important things, but these aren't necessarily things that our audiences think about first and foremost. They tend to think more about what's in it for me, right? So that was, in terms of kind of this chasm might be a strong word, but for lack of a better word, there can be a little bit of a chasm, right, between your leadership's view of what the priorities should be, and again, the audience's view. And sometimes the tension is very real, as I say. The tension is real. And so one of the things we talked a little bit about at the AMA session was how, everything from priorities to audience to aspirations to language, everything, we see a little differently as marketers than, say, our president or provost will see it. So just a couple of examples that I'm sure will resonate with the audience. So, our leadership tends to be very focused on the perceptions of their fellow higher ed peers, right? And elected officials or board members. Whereas, as marketers, we tend to be a little bit more focused on prospective students and their parents or the general public. And another observation I've made over time is, I think our leadership and internal folks tend to focus a little bit more on the trajectory, right? Like, look how far we've come over time. Look at all these improvements we've made over time. Look at, look at this graph and this chart and see how far we've, how things have gone straight up, which is wonderful. But again, for our audiences, they don't tend to care so much where we've been. They just want to know where we are right now, right? If I'm going to come to your institution, or if I'm going to send my child to your institution, what's their experience going to be today? I don't care how different it is from 5 years ago, right? So there's just some of these things that you kind of have to reconcile a little bit when you come to the strategic planning table and start to talk through, okay, what are the institutional priorities that we want to try and put out in the marketplace to really form our brand?
That's fantastic. And I kind of going back to my previous question around like, how do you bring this to the table, is one key thing that if I had to remember one word from your presentation is like research, right? Is do your research and bring that information of what the audience wants now, not what it was 5 years ago. Bring that information to the table so that you can have a meaningful discussion around like how you can add to the strategic plan or what you can shift. Is if I'm hearing things correctly.
Absolutely. No, Shiro, you got it. I mean, I think research is your friend always when you're a higher ed marketer. And I have found over time that, I can talk until I'm blue in the face and stand up on my soapbox and say, this is important and our audiences care about, this. But until you show them the data, so to speak, a lot of times it's hard to get their attention around some of those things. And by they, I mean, leadership or internal stakeholders who are leading the process. So I always bring data to the table whenever possible. And, the joy, again, one of the joys of working in academia is a lot of folks in leadership have research backgrounds. So they respond to that very, very quickly. And so it's been, that's been a key for sure in the success of getting a place at the table, right? I can bring data that you don't have right now. That's not part of this conversation yet.
That's fantastic. And kind of going back to the 3 points you found, I believe, which is excellent, looking for excellence teaching, affordability, and the last one was career preparation. Yes. So after learning that, like, what are some of the things that you and your team at UTSA did to help communicate how UTSA is supporting those efforts, or how they're able to provide a solution for that?
Yeah. So I have a good story I can share on that, and an interesting one. So, social mobility and career preparation are kind of adjacent, right? They're similar concepts, but they're a little different. And so, one of the things I had been hearing from our president and our leadership is we really need to emphasize how UTSA is a leader in enabling social mobility on the part of our students. We have a large population of first generation students, for example, at UTSA. And one of the things we've kind of made a signature, one of our signature aspects of our brand is that, many of our students graduate and have a quality of life that's much higher than their parents or grandparents did, because we prepared them so well, right, for a job. But, this notion, or this term social mobility isn't necessarily one that is just tossed around households, right? It's not an everyday term. And so, at one point we actually, because this is such a big theme, and we had been getting all sorts of national rankings for our ability to create social mobility for our graduates, that we actually made the mistake, Shiro, of putting that on a billboard at one point and saying, UTSA nationally ranked for social mobility. And after we did that, I had a conversation with a colleague who said something along the lines of, do people really know what social mobility means? Like general people out there? And I said, oh, yeah, you might be right. They might not know what it means, or they might not care. So when the opportunity came around to do our next research study, we actually just asked the question and we dug into it a little bit. Here's this notion of social mobility. What words would you use to describe what that means? And what would resonate most with you? What phrases would resonate most with you? And lo and behold, not surprisingly, the phrase social mobility did not rate. That was not one people were interested in. But phrases around things like higher quality of life, better life circumstances than your parents or grandparents, those kind of phrases really resonated much more. And so we changed our language too. That's how we've started in the ad campaigns that we're building, and in the brand collateral and materials that we're developing. That's the language we're using now. And I think that's one of the points we made at our AMA presentation, and one that I believe in so much is, you can't get stuck in that rut of using academies, because if you do, you're not speaking their language quite literally, right?
Right.
And so doing the testing, and again, this was another great example, Shiro. My leadership believed so passionately in the notion of social mobility that it's a little hard to convince them that not using those words is a good idea. But I was able to bring that research to the table and say, look, people don't know what social mobility means, but they do respond to these other phrases. So that's why we're going to lead with these in our marketing, and that made the case. That's
fantastic. That's a great story of trying to do the right thing, but having to figure out with data how you can really approach messaging and meet your audience where they are. That's great. I was curious about R1 messaging. I actually had a very similar conversation with Tim Senft, who is at Cornell University College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. They're also an R1 institution and get tons of grants for agricultural research. And this was a struggle for them as well because they wanted to market, that to their prospective students. But if to a student, if you say, hey, we're an R1 research institution, that doesn't really mean anything to them, right? And so as the digital communications director at the Agricultural and Life Sciences, they found out they made their website like a base of educating all the things that have come from Cornell, and all the great research has come as a way to communicate that, like, they do all this research. And I thought that was fascinating, but I don't know how you have interpreted how to tell your audience that as well.
Yeah, that was a journey, and what a fun one that was. So UTSA received Carnegie R1 status in January of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the culmination of a long-term goal that had been many folks at the university had worked on for many years.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a centerpiece of our strategic plan up until that point, that was one of our main goals. And so to achieve this was a big deal. It was a big deal internally. And as you mentioned, though, Shiro, unfortunately, people on the outside, so to speak, outside of academia, they have no idea what that means. They don't know what the Carnegie classification of higher education institutions is all about. They certainly don't know what initials like R1, R2, all the alphabet soup that we use in there, right?
Yes.
Meaningless to them. Again, our audiences are looking at it in terms of what's in it for me, not, how great you are as an institution. So, not surprisingly, when we were, kind of fairly certain late in 2021, when we kind of got all the feelers and the indicators that yes, we were going to get it and get ready. I was, of course, getting requests and had many conversations with our leadership around how are we going to market this? How are we going to let everybody know? We need to tell the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
We need to tell the world, which is one of my favorite things that I love to say. If I had a dime every time someone said we need to tell the world, if only the world knew, then they would be, so impressed with us. They'd all come in droves. But unfortunately, as marketers, we know we can't afford to tell the world our news, right? And we need to be a little more strategic about narrowing down our audiences. So that was the first thing I did, was kind of say, this is amazing, wonderful news, but we can't necessarily tell the world, nor will the world care, because there are a lot of R1 institutions out there. There are about 140 others besides us.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we make the most impact with our marketing dollars to elevate this news in a way that's going to be meaningful for the audience, and figure out who that audience is to start with? Like, who do we really want to know this first and foremost? So, we identified some audiences. Some biggies, of course, were our alumni. We wanted to be sure they knew that the value of their degree just went up a few notches. Certainly, prospective students, we wanted San Antonio to be proud of us. We wanted the general San Antonio community, whether or not they have any relationship to UTSA, to be proud of their hometown university and feel like it's helping to elevate the city as a whole, right? It's not just about us, it's about all of San Antonio, because we are San Antonio's university. So once we did some of that audience definition, then the next part of the exercise was, okay, let's look at each of these groups and talk through and talk to them and find out what about this R1 status is meaningful to you. If we take the time to explain it to you and kind of dig in a little bit, what aspects of this are going to be important to you? And that's where we developed all of our messaging, right? So not surprisingly, along this theme of, what's in it for me, we really couched all of our messaging in terms of, here's what you, prospective student, you alum, you elected official, here's why you should care about UTSA's R1 status, and here's what it means. So, it was things about, the value of your degree going up, becoming more, having more opportunities to go to graduate school, having more having more funding come in to do research. And again, all these messages were tailored according to, the audience and what they would care about. And so we developed a whole bunch of collateral around this. For the general San Antonio population, our advertising campaign really revolved around this notion of UTSA is San Antonio's Tier 1 university. And and Tier 1 was a wording that we used based on a whole other little research project, which I won't go into now, but we had some degree of confidence that wording would resonate and kind of talk about the prestige it brought to the city. So yeah, again, it was an exercise in kind of taking what the institutional priority and leadership desire is and translating it for your audience in a way that'll be meaningful to them.
That's great. I love how you broke down more of an abstract, I don't want to say abstract completely entirely, but more of an abstract ask, broke it down into strategic parts, into a plan that was realistic, and also would drive the most impact. That's fantastic. That's a good marketing practice in general. That's awesome. I think if we took that last 5 minutes, created a piece of content from it, from any school expecting to reach R1 status anytime soon, their marketing director or AVP will have a lot less work to do.
Yeah. Well, and I'm happy to talk to any institution that's on the cusp of that. So the Carnegie classification system is going to be changing a little bit next year. And so the prediction is that there will be more institutions who achieve R1 status under the new guidelines that are coming out. And so I imagine there's going to be quite a few institutions that are going to find themselves in this same position. And so I would be happy to consult with any of them. So when it comes time to share my contact information, please, I'll just put out a blanket extension to anyone who would like to contact me to talk about that. I'd be happy to.
Well, you read my mind because we are just about at time, and I was about to ask you, where our audience and listeners can reach out to you and to learn more about what you're up to and the good work you're doing at UTSA.
Absolutely. So probably the easiest place to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. I'm very responsive to LinkedIn messages. On LinkedIn, I actually use my maiden name, my middle name, because Ann Peters is a very common name. So it's Ann, A-N-N-E, Conaway Peters. So Conaway Peters. And I think I'm the only Ann Conaway Peters in there. So if you type that in, you'll find me. And I would love to start up a conversation.
Well, thank you so much. It was really great to meet you in person and also record this podcast today. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Shiro. Thank you for doing this podcast. It's a real resource.
Thank you so much, Ann.